Hi, I'm Hindur. As I guess you know by now, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to flight simulators. When I jump in my flight sim, I like to mimic the real world as best as I can. I have even taken some training through VATSIM and had to do a bunch of theoretical exams and practical checks rides together with real-world pilots as instructors. So I have these two books from the FIA that I use, and I also have the equivalent Norwegian book, Veien til flysertifikatet, or Road to PPL. I have also done one real-world flight in a Cessna 172 with a instructor, and that was really cool because then I could see what my flight sim experience, how that transfer over to real life. And I'm happy to say, for me at least, I managed to do the whole flight by myself, except from the very touchdown onto the runway. So that was really cool. I got to try everything from turning the key and starting the engine, all the way to we parked, and I cut off the mixture and did the shutdown checklist. So that was really cool, and I really encourage you to try it if you get the opportunity yourself. So today I wanted to talk to you a bit about flying VFR online on the VATSIM network. And remember, as I said, this is purely for VATSIM, so we try to mimic the real world as best as we can, but of course there are some differences. But like I guess most of you, I also started my VATSIM exploration flying IFR flights. And if you think about it, it's a bit of the opposite in regards to real-world pilot education, where you start off with your PPL, then your instrument rating and so on, and finally you are capable of flying IFR. Well, for some reason in VATSIM it's the opposite. You often start flying big airliners on IFR flights. And then maybe you start off with VFR flying on some later point. But for me at least, I think VFR flying on VATSIM is actually a bit more difficult than flying IFR. Because when you fly IFR, you follow the instrument departures and arrivals and comply with ATC restrictions, and you don't have to worry about... Of course, you have to worry about altitudes, but they are in the chart, so if you follow them, it's okay. And you don't have to worry about airspaces, for example. But when you fly a VFR, well, you are left a bit to yourself, and you have to figure out all the airspaces, what altitudes to be on. You have to file your flight plan more of a manual order. Because when I fly IFR, I usually go to resources like SimBrief. Then I just put in my aircraft type, my departure, arrival, and so on, and click generate, and out comes a fully functioning flight plan, which I then can pre-file directly into VATSIM. But VFR, well, you have to figure out these things by yourself. So today I thought we could talk a bit about it, and you can follow along to look at how I plan my VFR flights on VATSIM. And well, if this video ain't for you, then just skip over to another one. But if you want to get a little insight in at least my thinking about this, well, just follow and we'll talk about it. Okay, so since I live in Norway, which is in the northern part of Europe, we can plan a flight from Oslo Airport Gardermoen and westbound over to Bergen Airport Flesland. So the first thing I do is obviously have a look at the weather, because we are planning a VFR flight, so we have to make sure that the conditions actually are YMC all the way from our departure to our destination. And by the way, as you can see, today I am using Navigraph, but you can of course use whatever you like. Should it be SkyVector, windy.com and whatever. doesn't really matter as long as you can have a look at the weather and choose at what altitude you depict the weather at. The weather planning for today is a rather abbreviated look at the weather, because after all this is for flight simulation and not real world flying. So let's get to it. I start off by toggling on the weather and my layers and make sure that both METAR and cloud cover is on for now. And then come down here to the right side and make sure that you are at a altitude for your flight today. So for that we have to look at the enroute terrain altitudes. And as you can see in these charts, these big green numbers, they are off-route minimum safe altitudes. So the closest one to our flight path today is 8,600 in the north, and down to the south you can see 7,900. But actually what I use to determine my minimum safe cruise altitude is a little nav map, because when you put in your flight plan here, you get a vertical profile directly under your flight path. So as you can see here by the red bar, the minimum en route safe altitude for this flight, as it's set up right now, is 6,000 feet. And since we are flying VFR and we are flying westbound, we have to be at minimum 6,500 for this direction of flight. Should we have flown eastbound from Bergen and over to Oslo, then we would have to be at a minimum 7,500. The reason for that is because flights westbound should be on a even altitude and flights eastbound should be on a odd altitude. And by the way, these requirements to be at 6,500 or 7,500, they only is applicable if you are flying above 3,000 feet above the ground elevation. So for this flight today over to Bergen, we could actually be flying on a lower altitude as long as you remain 1,000 feet above urban areas and 500 feet above any rural areas. But for the ease of flight planning, we will plan a level flight, because otherwise it's kind of hard to look at fuel consumption and so on. Okay, back to the weather. So we have determined that our minimum en route altitude is 6,500. So then I go down to my weather layers once again, turn off the METAR and turn on the icing, cloud cover and wind barbs. I think that is a minimum of what you should be looking at for your flight. So then we can use the altitude and we can check the different altitudes to see if there are any clouds, and with clouds there is also this time of year in Norway icing. So we can see at 5,000 feet to the south there is expected some clouds and icing, but that is 5,000 and 6,000. But if we go a bit higher, we see that 8,000 and way above our aircraft's capabilities, there are today no clouds and no icing. And then we can have a look at the winds. It's kind of hard to see, but they are these small wind barbs here. So what I like to do is to once again check the different altitudes to see at what altitude we can use the winds best to our advantage. So the winds are rather calm up to at least 8,000 feet, and above that they become a bit stronger. But today I am planning a flight for a DA40, which neither has oxygen or pressurized cabin. So I would like to stay below flight level 100. And looking at the winds again, I think that today's flight will be at flight level 85. A final thought about weather planning: it can be a bit of a rabbit hole, and you have to see for yourself how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. But for us flight simmers, I think that with current weather like this weather planning is more than sufficient for our short flight over to Bergen today. Okay, so let's have a closer look at enroute navigation. And as most of us know today, the Earth is round and not flat. Wow. So if you are planning a long VFR flight, you have to take into account the Earth curvature. And what's really cool about Navigraph is that it takes this into account. So let me just show you. If we change over to Boston for our arrival, then you see that the direct route isn't just one straight line. It takes into account the Earth's curvature. So for our flight to Bergen today, we want to choose some en route navigation waypoints that is close to this projected flight path. So we could of course do this flight just using our GPS and flying directly from our departure to our arrival. But to make the flight plan look a bit more professional, then I choose to use the waypoint, the RNAV fix Adopi, and also the RNAV fix PSUR to make our flight plan into 3 legs instead just 1 long leg. So what navigational aids can you actually put into your VFR flight plan on VATSIM? Well, you can use RNAV fixes and you can use ground-based navigation aids like VORs and NDBs, for example. And what differs a bit between the US and Europe when it's come to VFR flying is that in Europe you tend to be cleared out of the terminal area via one of these VRPs that you see here with the black triangle. But these VRPs you don't put into your flight plan, and you don't either put in any airports you overfly. Those are not supported in the flight plan format that VATSIM uses. But on our departure out of Gardermoen, I would expect to get cleared to leave the control zone via the, for example, via the Nannestad VRP, not above altitude 2500, which is the top altitude for the Gardermoen Tower control zone. Above that we come into Oslo approach class Charlie airspace. So as we fly along, I would suspect that we should remain below 2500 till we reach at least Råsjøen. Then we could start our climb up to 3000, and depending on the goodwill of the Oslo approach, we can at some point start our climb up to cruise altitude of 8500 feet. Or in Norway, since we have a transition altitude at 7000 feet, it would be flight level 85. Alright, so beginning to wrap this up, the final items we need for our flight plan is our true airspeed at cruise, our expected en route time, and our fuel endurance. And once again for this I use the little nav map, because here you can load your aircraft performance file. And if you plug in your flight plan and head over to fuel report, you will actually get the expected flight time, the true airspeed at cruise, and your fuel consumption. And here you can of course choose yourself how much fuel you want to carry, as long as you have this block fuel as a minimum, together with the VFR fuel requirements. But you can of course also go into your aircraft documents, and here you can try to get these numbers of the charts, if that is what you prefer, or you don't find any aircraft performance file for a little nav map. I will put a link down in the description to a page with different aircraft performance files, and you can see if your aircraft type is there. And it's categorized into different simulators, but that doesn't really matter, because it's not the simulator you are flying, it's the aircraft. So if you find it in X-Plane, P3D or whatever, you can use it from there. Okay, so the last thing that remains is to fill out your flight plan and file it into the VATSIM system. And if you use the little nav map for your planning, you can file the flight plan directly from little nav map to SimBrief and pre-file it to VATSIM from there. Or you can do as I do here and just type it in manually. Today I call myself Lima November, which is Norway, and then Lima Hotel Mike. And we are flying VFR, aircraft type is Diamond 40, and the wake category is light. Equipment, we use GPS today, so for general GA aircraft, the equipment code with GPS is G. Then we depart from Oslo Airport Gardermoen, and off block time, let's put in 1300 Zulu. Altitude 8500 or flight level 85. Airspeed expected at cruise is 125, and the arrival airport is Bergen. Alternate not required for VFR, and the enroute expected time is 1 hour and 20 minutes today. For fuel endurance, I usually load up my aircraft with a lot of fuel, because it's free in the simulator, so let's just put in 3 hours there. For our route, we have already put in our departure and arrival airport, so we just put in the routing we set up, which was the RNAV fixes, Adopi and PSUR. And remember, you don't put in your VRPs or visual reference points, and neither the different airfields you could be overflying. Only RNAV fixes and ground-based navigation like VOR or NDB, etc. So down here, the final thing I put in is my registration, and that is the same as the call sign, except for the dash in between. And then you hit file and send it into VATSIM. Okay, so welcome to the end of a fairly long and maybe a slightly boring video about VFR flight planning. But in regards to the new requirements from VATSIM to know the airspaces you are flying into, I highly encourage you to read up on those charts and use the things I talked about in this video. And remember, it's all supposed to be fun, so failures happened, and they are allowed to happen, but I encourage you to try to be as best prepared as you possibly can. Okay, thanks for watching and see you later.